Nowadays, when you think about Josh Smith, you may remember him being a part of the Rockets' comeback in the conference finals against the Clippers, or you may remember those ugly days in Detroit where he was eventually cut. But what we're going to talk about today is Josh Smith when he was at his best for the Atlanta Hawks, where he was one of the most exciting as well as versatile players in the NBA. But before we get to all the nerdy stuff with the versatility, we're just going to talk about the excitement of the dude. He could have been the best dunker in the NBA for a multi-year stretch. I say it's a conversation. I mean, he was competing with the likes of LeBron James, Tracy McGrady, Kobe Bryant could still get up there. But Josh Smith was definitely one of the best at just being theatric, going up to the rim, whether it be alley-oops, whether it would be offensive rebounds that he would immediately put back in, which we're actually going to dive into because that was a pretty valuable thing he did for those Atlanta Hawks. His craftiness getting to the rim, dunking on people's heads, fast breaks, windmills. Josh Smith was fun, is the best way to put it when it came to his dunking. But if all the guy was a good dunker, we wouldn't be remembering him like that. He was a very talented player and one of the more well-rounded ones in the NBA. So let's go and dive into some of his more distinct abilities that really helped Atlanta. Well, the first one, which I already mentioned, was how he used that athleticism to be one of the better offensive rebounders in the NBA. In his time with the Hawks, Josh Smith grabbed 2 offensive boards per game, and just forcing the other team to constantly have a body on him, boxing him out. That does add some extra pressure to the other team, but it's always that little extra thing that needs to be in the back of their mind. Overall, Josh Smith was a very good rebounder for them, as he would average around 7.5 a game. So he definitely knew how to use his athleticism effectively, and there were also a few times where his offensive rebounding actually would be the deciding moment in a close game like this one here. You always got to keep a body on the 6'9" dude who can jump through the roof, and if you didn't, it was probably going to be a putback slam. But then we get to what may be my favorite part of Josh Smith, and that's his defense. He was an intimidating shot blocker, and here's a stat for you. From the 2009 season to the 2014 season, the Atlanta Hawks' average defensive rating was 105.6, which is pretty good. Josh Smith's personal defensive rating in that time, 102.8. So he made them essentially 3 points better defensively whenever he was on the floor. One player having that sort of an impact, to me, is pretty significant, especially for how long of a stretch it was from 2009 to 2014. His block shots, his ability to defend a few positions, even if switching defense wasn't as big back then as it is now. Smith knew how to use that verticality to his advantage. But it wasn't all just athleticism. Smith actually had a decent handle, so if you decided to leave him wide open on the perimeter, and he didn't shoot a three-pointer, which is something we're going to have to talk about with him, then he was actually pretty intimidating going down low. I mean, he does kind of remind me of LeBron James a bit when you combine his size. Now, of course, LeBron, a significantly better ball handler and more creative attacking the rim, but Smith was not half bad himself. I mean, the guy averaged 16 to 18 points a game for a decent stretch for Atlanta, and part of that was because he could actually beat his guy off the dribble, whether it be in the low post, spin moves, some jab steps as we're seeing here, and of course he was great at finishing down low because of that athleticism once again. His offensive game, while it wasn't super polished, and we will talk about that, again, the jump shot being the topic of discussion there, he had enough, given his physical gifts, to be pretty effective. But another skill set of his that I think was a little underrated at the time was his playmaking. Smith averaged 3.2 assists per game with Atlanta, including 2 different seasons where he averaged over 4 assists a game. And given that this was an era where we weren't just giving the ball to power forwards as much as we do now with small ball fours, this is pretty impressive. You could say that Smith was a bit ahead of his time because nowadays this is the type of power forward that we really embrace. The Paul Millsaps, the Draymond Greens of the world who can make these sort of plays. I would love to see Josh Smith in today's NBA making passes like these. But now we got to talk about that dreaded jump shot that Sure, these ones may be going in, but the majority of the time they did not, as Josh Smith has not once ever shot league average from 3. But as any fan of a team who Josh Smith played on will tell you, he did love taking his jumpers. And was it a problem? Yeah, sometimes they were ill-advised. I think the positive still outweighs the negative, but it was a bit of an annoyance as his career went on. But still, Josh Smith, the athleticism, the skill around the basket, the offensive rebounding, his playmaking, as well as how good he was defensively at his peak. I mentioned before how I'd love to see him play in today's game. I really would, because I think back then, as little as 4 or 5 years ago, a team might not have known how to really use him, whereas I think now, he'd be one of the more exciting players in the league.